Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we are covering the next card in our Tarot in Depth series. This time we are going over the Emperor. The Emperor Tarot card in modern interpretations is increasingly associated with the gender essentialist ideas of the masculine divine, with male divine figures and with paternal figures such as patriarchal authorities, fathers, and father-like figures. However, at the time of the Tarot's creation, in the 15th century, the Holy Roman Emperor's power struggles with the Pope would have been a well-known, well-understood influence on the Tarot's design. A person in the 1450 CE in Italy would not have looked at the Emperor card and seen a stand-in for the power of male gods, or even the power of the father of their household, but rather a symbol of power of the empire and of politics. Specifically, it would have evoked the idea of the Holy Roman Emperor. The Holy Roman Emperor was the last vestige of the old Empire of Rome, dating from Charlemagne until 1806 CE, when Napoleon dissolved the institution and was considered to be the secular arm of the authority of God on earth. This was in direct contrast to the Pope, who was considered the spiritual head of the authority of God on earth. According to tradition, the Holy Roman Emperor was crowned as such by the Pope and was considered to be the only legitimate and legal successor to the Roman Emperor. In theory, they would then work with the Pope in order to expand the influence of God on earth. In practice, the title bestowed an additional image of infallibility and divine right onto a ruling authority, specifically that of the King of Germany. Therefore, the Emperor is a paternalistic figure of supreme and unquestionable authority. They dictate the rules in any given situation and can symbolize the figure of the highest conventional authority in any given situation: politician, boss, tyrannical parent, cop, etc. Could the Emperor be based on a real person? One of two Visconti Sforza decks that portray the Emperor does so in a way that some tarot historians interpret to mean the card was based on a real person. One, the Pierpont Morgan Bergamo set, also known as the Coglione Baglioni set or the Francesco Sforza set, was produced around 1450 CE and is considered one of the oldest of the Visconti Sforza decks. The Emperor in this deck is depicted as an old man with a long beard, dressed in gold and blue robes, and bears no resemblance to any known historical figure. The other was originally named for the Cary collection of playing cards and was absorbed into the Yale University Library in 1967 CE, so it is sometimes known as the Cary-Yale deck, but most often as the Visconti di Madrone set. It has been dated to approximately 1465 CE. However, there are tarot historians who claim that the Visconti di Madrone deck is the oldest of the decks and that it predates the Visconti Sforza Pierpont Morgan Bergamo deck. In a 2007 book, The History of the Tarot, scholar Giordano Berti claimed that the deck was created between 1442 and 1447 CE, and cites the fact that the denari cards bear the recto and verso of the golden florin created by F.M. Visconti in 1442 CE and withdrawn from circulation when he died in 1447 CE. Both decks were likely created by artist Bonifacio Bembo or by his family. It is the depiction of the Emperor in the Visconti di Madrone deck that some tarot historians believe was based on a real person. On the card, the figure of the Emperor is still that of a bearded man, but his beard is much shorter and split in style. He wears a wide hat typical of Hungarian fashions in the 1400s, which bears the insignia of the imperial eagle. The man bears a distinct resemblance to Emperor Sigismund, the King of Hungary, King of Croatia, King of Germany, King of Bohemia, King of Italy, and finally Holy Roman Emperor at the age of 65. A portrait of Emperor Sigismund by Albrecht Dürer shows the resemblance of the card to the historical figure, especially the Emperor's distinct forked beard. History. In the Visconti Sforza, also called the Pierpont Morgan Bergamo or Coglione Baglioni deck from circa 1450 CE, the Emperor is portrayed, as aforementioned, as a bearded man wearing a crown marked with the imperial eagle that matches the imperial eagle on the shield of the Empress. The Emperor holds a globe in one hand and is wearing distinct red shoes. The Mantegna Tarocchi, circa 1450 CE, of which copies exist in several museums in the world. The card shown here is from the British Museum, has the Emperor listed as Imperator 9. and shows the emperor with a contemplative or ponderous expression, staring at the globe with the imperial eagle at his feet. The Emperor from the Edmund Rothschild collection deck, which is currently preserved in the Louvre in Paris from the late medieval or late Gothic period, circa 1450 CE to 1460 CE, also depicts the emperor holding the globe, as well as a scepter, again with a ponderous or pensive facial expression. Instead of an eagle at his feet, there are two bearded men, in proportion to whom the emperor seems gigantic. The Emperor from the Charles VI deck, conserved in the French National Library from the early Renaissance, circa 1460 to 1465 CE, was likely made by a Florentine artist as the border decoration of the emperor's clothes and the boy's clothes as a typical style element for Florentine artists. In the deck, the emperor holds the same scepter and orb as in the Edmund Rothschild collection deck, as well as a nearly identical crown. There is no shield with an imperial eagle like on the Milanese cards. Ferrara was a papal state and not part of the Holy Roman Empire, which may have caused the emperor on the card to be depicted in a more generic fashion. Or the emperor in the decks could be based on the Byzantine emperor. Both decks of cards may have been ordered by the Este court of Ferrara. In the earliest known list of the trumps, the Sermons de Ludo Comalis, also called the Steel Sermon from circa 1470 CE, the emperor is number 3, Imperator. In the Solabusca deck, the earliest complete extant example of a 78-card Tarocchi deck from the late 15th century, the card most tarot historians believe is meant to be the emperor is Mario, card number 4, which depicts a very martial figure charging off to battle in a winged helmet while carrying a shield. I personally do not find that the Solabusca Tarot aligns with tarot as we think of it. I think of it as an entirely separate system, but most tarot historians disagree with me, and they seem to have interpreted certain cards as matching with or being representing the same ideas. Sometimes I can see it, sometimes I can't. In this particular case, I really can't. That doesn't resemble an emperor card to me, but it is what a lot of tarot historians claim matches. The early Italian and French block print decks from the 15th and 16th century generally depict a generic bearded emperor holding a globe and scepter. Most Italian emperors are surrounded by small figures, sometimes portrayed as very small in relation to the gigantic emperor, like in the aforementioned card. These likely represent courtiers or servants. The Tarot de Paris, currently held in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, an anonymous and atypical deck that does not take the form of the Tarot of Marseille, depicted one of the few standing emperors. He has a large feather in his crown and appears armored for battle. Most hand-painted decks from the 15th and 16th century periods omit the imperial eagle. In the Budapest Tarot from the last quarter of the 15th century, the emperor holds the globus cruciger and the scepter, and a crown quite similar to a papal crown. The emperor from the Rosenwald sheet, made by the end of the 15th century in Bologna, has the standard imagery of the scepter and globe with the front-facing emperor. The Budapest sheet, made around the turn of the century, 15th to 16th in Ferrara, depicted the emperor facing forward on his throne, holding the globe on his lap with the imperial eagle on a shield at his feet. The Cary sheet, a mid-16th century partial uncut sheet from a woodblock print, which is the earliest known example of a Tarot de Marseille style deck, from Milan, depicted the emperor sitting sideways, holding the shield with the imperial eagle in one hand and the scepter topped with the globe in the other. It is interesting to note that on the hand-painted Charles VI deck made for the Este court by the Florentine artist, the imperial eagle is not depicted, while on the Budapest sheet, likely produced in Ferrara, the imperial eagle is present. Decks produced in areas that were in papal control seem to lack the imperial eagle, whereas decks that were produced in areas under imperial control and not papal control seem to have the eagle. In France, through the 16th and 17th centuries, the decks went back and forth between less traditional portrayals of the emperor and the standard portrayal, including the imperial eagle. The emperor of the Caitlin Joffrey deck, from circa 1557 CE, is more the former, while the Jacques Fivel, mid-17th century, is more the former. By the late 17th century, the Tarot de Marseille pattern became the standardized norm. Tarot deck production had moved primarily to France, and so most decks developed distinctive Tarot de Marseille inspired characteristics. One exception to the standard pattern of the Tarot de Marseille deck is the 1794 CE redesign of the Tarot de Marseille deck by artist Francois Isnard. After the Revolution, French printers altered their woodblocks to destroy imperial symbolism. The card shown here was originally created by Francois Isnard in the 1760s and then later altered by a print shop either during or shortly after the Revolution of 1793 CE. The emperor was renamed Grand-Père, grandfather, in most of the productions. His crown was replaced by what looked like a stocking cap with a tassel. The scepter was replaced with a flower, and the imperial eagle has been removed from his shield. Within decades, the decks returned to their original Tarot de Marseille pattern. In Italy, development of the tarot continued independently from the Marseille tarot. Here is the Emperor from an anonymous tarocchini deck from the beginning of the 17th century, which is preserved in the French National Library. The Italian Catholic designer and artist Giuseppe Maria Mitelli in circa 1664 CE did not include the Empress in his deck, only a sitting emperor and a standing emperor. It is preserved in the British Museum. The seated emperor's globe was depicted as much larger than standard, although the rest of the imagery was fairly consistent with emperor cards of the time period. In Bologna, the early 18th century saw the creation of a new Bolognese-style deck, Bologna's unique 62-card tarocchino, called Tarocco Bolognese elsewhere in Italy. Its designs were similar to those developed in the 15th century. The basic design is still in use to today. In 1725 CE, there was a serious conflict between the Church's ruler of the Papal States and the city-state of Bologna. As a result, 4 cards, the Empress, the Emperor, the Popess, and the Pope, were replaced by 4 Moors that served as equal value in the playing cards. Modern Moors in the decks are nearly identical, with the only difference between them being the number of arrows or spears that they hold. But some of the earliest decks, such as the Almondo deck from the mid-17th century CE, had more variants, showing the Moors holding symbolic implements that hint at which card they might have replaced of the original 4. The Moor shown here, likely an emperor substitute, holds a scepter topped by the sun. Antoine Court de Gabelin's 1781 CE book of pseudo-anthropology Le Monde Primitif, illustrated by Mademoiselle Lenotte, depicted the emperor holding the globus cruciger top scepter and included the shield with the imperial eagle. Italians eventually adopted the French Tarot de Marseille design, although they added more detail. The Milanese Sopraffino deck was created in 1835 CE when the Milanese printer Ferdinand Gumpenberg commissioned a deck from the artist and engraver Carlo della Rocca. The Milanese Sopraffino emperor does not hold the globe, but does hold the scepter. His clothing is festooned with lace and fringe, and the imperial eagle device on his shield has turned into an actual bird. Like the Empress card from the same deck, there is an element of ermine. The 19th century Italian tarot cards varied some across their portrayal of the emperor, with some depicting him standing in armor, such as the 1810 CE Tarot of Lombardy produced in Milan. The Holy Roman Empire ceased to exist in 1806 CE, and this may have contributed to why the emperor is depicted in this deck without a throne and other distinctive signs of power, and he's standing beside ruins. 19th century French occultists like Eliphas Levi, Oswald Wirth, and Papist retained the Tarot de Marseille imagery and style to some degree, but altered it to suit their own esoteric and occult interpretations. Eliphas Levi's description in his 1856 CE book Transcendental Magic isn't exactly positive towards the emperor. The emperor or ruler, the 4th day is baleful. It was that of the birth of Cain, but it is favorable to unjust and tyrannical enterprises. In 1887 CE, Stanislas de Guaita, founder and grandmaster of l'Ordre Cabalistique de la Rose-Croix, asked Wirth, a member of the order and an amateur artist, to create a deck embodying the order's teachings, which were heavily influenced by Eliphas Levi. Wirth created 350 copies of his deck, each colored by hand, to be distributed to fellow initiates. Oswald Wirth's card follows Levi's imagery closely. The emperor is depicted holding the traditional globus cruciger and scepter, but instead of a throne, he is shown sitting on a stone cube, with the angle of his legs shifted to resemble the astrological symbol of Jupiter. Wirth associated the emperor with the number 4 and the Hebrew letter Daleth. Wirth then redesigned his original 1887 CE deck in the early 20th century to make it conform more closely to Levi's writings. The 18th century occultist associated the emperor with ideas such as mastery, strong will, power, rulership, and dominance. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn became popular in London in 1888 CE. They associated the emperor with the Hebrew letter Eh, and assigned him astrological associations with Aries and Mars. They considered him the son of the morning and very much leaned into the more martial elements of an emperor's duties, associating the card with war, victory, and conquering. Decks influenced by the Golden Dawn's interpretations tend to heavily use the color red and ram's heads in order to link the emperor with Mars. The most popular and well-known Emperor card was created by two former members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, A.E. Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith, in circa 1909 CE. A.E. Waite and P.C. Smith followed the Golden Dawn closely when designing their card. Rams dominate the imagery. The Emperor's cloak is deep red, as in the Golden Dawn Tarot. There is no imperial eagle or shield. The globus cruciger has been replaced by a simple golden globe. The scepter has been topped with an ankh, a crux ansata. The mountains and river behind the Emperor are unique to this card's imagery. According to Waite, the Emperor is Lord of Thought and is sitting on a throne of intellect. In his book, The Pictorial Key to the Tarot, written in 1910 CE, Waite referred to the Emperor as a virile power who attempts to remove the veil of Isis, yet she remains Virgo intactica, reinforcing the later occultist association of the Emperor with a gender essentialist male idea of power. The full quote: "He is a crowned monarch, commanding, stately, seated on a throne, the arms of which are fronted by ram's heads. He is executive and realization, the power of this world, here clothed with the highest of its natural attributes. He is occasionally represented as seated on a cubic stone, which, however, confuses some of the issues. He is the virile power to which the Empress responds, and in this sense is he who seeks to remove the veil of Isis, yet she remains Virgo intactica. It should be understood that this card and that of the Empress do not precisely represent the condition of married life, though this state is implied. On the surface, as I have indicated, they stand for mundane royalty, uplifted on the seats of the mighty, but above this there is a suggestion of another presence. They signify also, and the male figure especially, the higher kingship, occupying the intellectual throne. Hereof is the lordship of thought, rather than of the animal world. Both personalities, after their own manner, are full of strange experience, but theirs is not consciously the wisdom which draws from a higher world. The Emperor has been described as A, will in its embodied form, but this is only one of its applications, and B, as an expression of virtualities contained in the absolute being, but this is fantasy. The imagery based on Levi's writings and popularized by the work of Wirth, Waite, and Smith became the standard in the 20th century, combining appropriated Hebrew symbolism, Catholic symbolism, and pagan symbolism into a single card. In the 21st century, the Emperor card became increasingly associated with the aforementioned masculine divine and gender essentialist occultism, the sexual power of assigned male at birth persons, and men, including potentially trans men, and with various gods and neo-pagan divine figures, including the green man, the horned god, the sacrificial king, or the king who is furrowed under. In the Mythic Tarot, the Emperor is portrayed as Zeus. In the Wildwood Tarot, the Emperor is a green man working over a cauldron. In the Chrysalis Tarot, the Emperor is a leaf-covered green man watching protectively over a bird's nest. Thank you for joining us. Next time in our Tarot in Depth series, we will go over the divinatory meanings for the Emperor card, which we will do for general readings, past, present, future, love, work, money, spirituality, LGBTQIA readings. We'll go over card combinations. We'll go over questions that you can ask yourself when you pull that card in a reading, and we'll go over its interpretation in various other systems such as Rider-Waite, Golden Dawn, Ouspensky, Theron, Zatala, etc. Please remember to like and subscribe, and if you haven't sent us one already, maybe consider sending us a question for Ask a Witch. As always, patrons gain access to exclusive content, including the books that go along with this series, which you can find at patreon.com/Sanctum of the Craft. Again, that's patreon.com/Sanctum of the Craft. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Be safe out there, everyone.